So thank you all for sticking around. That is the biggest thing of these long days like this. And I know Cameron and I talked about it in the past. It's the cookies that keep you here. So let's all thank Cameron and Penny Lane for cookies in the afternoon. So all day long, you have had experiences. Watch, I'm going to turn this off. I do it all the time. You've had lots of experiences and lots of education. And our conversation today is to try and bring all of that together so that you leave here with a real strong sense of the energy, the information, the connections that you've made that you can take back out into your work in your communities, okay? So once again, my name is John Sovec, and I am a queer therapist. I am a cisgender man, and I have been married with my partner. We're just about to celebrate 25 years together. And going back to something Luca said earlier, it all started at Disneyland. I actually did. I met my husband at Disneyland. And usually when people are telling their stories of when they met, we always wait till the end. Because how can you actually cap the story that you met your partner at Disneyland, right? Okay. So, why are we here today? And why in June is this moment of pride so important to all of us in the community? The world is created on a cisgender, heterocentric model. It is. That's just the way it works. And to those of you who are working with students in school systems, have you ever stopped to really contemplate how cis and het those school systems are? Every waking moment of a kid attending school is based on this model. So it's important that we come together to create spaces for other voices, other energies, other identities to live and to be experienced. So for myself, I was really, really blessed as a kid. I came out around 15, 16. My family was very affirming about it. There's some caveats that come with that. We'll talk about that in a bit. My friends thought it was really cool to have a gay friend, and they all tried to set me up on dates, and they thought, like, yeah, and they're still part of my life today. They love me, they love my husband, and that's been a beautiful experience that I got blessed to have. My husband, on the other hand, I grew up here in LA. He grew up about an hour and a half north of here in Bakersfield, California. Yes. And whenever he's bad, I threaten to send him back home to Bakersfield. But his experience was incredibly different. What he experienced was bullying, both physical and vocal. And there was one day that really always stands out for me in his experience. His dad was picking him up after school, and they were driving home, and all the windows were down. And as they pulled out of the schoolyard, a bunch of kids yelled "faggot" really loudly. And Martin, my husband, and his dad drove home in complete silence because nobody knew what to say in that moment. My partner wasn't out. He didn't come out until college. But in that moment, he had been othered. And I think a lot of us in this room know what it feels like to be othered for all kinds of things. And that's why it's important that we come together as a community in these conferences and to step back into the world. So a little bit more about me. Yes, you know some of the basics, but there's more than just the stuff I do. There's like, I'm a baker. I'm a gardener. I'm also a yoga teacher. I taught yoga this morning before coming here. Kind of a good way to start the day. I am an avid reader. At any one time, I've probably got 5 books like hanging out on my nightstand, ready to go, or on my Kindle. And that's actually one of the reasons I kind of fell in love with my husband is he's also an avid reader, and we will toss books back and forth across to each other all the time. As Cameron mentioned, I'm also an author. This is my book. You can find it online, or more importantly, ask for it at your local bookstore. It was shortlisted for a Lambda Literary Award, and I did win an ASEC Literary Award. So kind of a thing I'm proud of, yeah. This book is designed both for parents, but also for caregivers and professionals to have a way to move through this whole storyline. But I think it's important to start at the beginning. And Luca may have shared his childhood pictures, but mine are in black and white, okay? So here's this little nugget. This is John. Yay. As you can notice, John was a little bit shiny, even as a tiny tot, right? And it was really cool because as I grew up, I became that kid who would sing and dance and run around all the time. Until I got to elementary school, and then I realized that singing and dancing and running around all the time was kind of looked at askance, okay? And there was a pushback against that identity. So I decided I had to move it inside. A storyline that almost every LGBTQ person goes through, where we have to take an identity which we're just starting to bring to light. We're just starting to nurture. It's this little seedling of who we are, and we're told it's not okay, and we have to put it away. And I guarantee that the kids you are working with are going through this themselves or have gone through it. So as I kept developing, I got a little bit quieter, and then I hit adolescence. And as we know in adolescence, everything explodes. All of a sudden, hormones were raging through my body. This weird idea that I was different suddenly became like, oh my God, guys are hot, okay? And my body was like, oh, all this response was happening. But think about it. In school as a gay kid, dating is dangerous. If I say, oh my God, you are so hot, and I want to try and ask you out, I have to go to all of my friends and be like, do you think they're gay? Do you think they'd be bisexual? Do you think they're pansexual? Do you think maybe they'd want to go out with me? Do you think I'd be okay? Well, all that's happening, and then maybe I come up and I ask you out, that's putting my life in danger. All of this stuff is exploding in my head. And an important thing for every care provider in this room to understand is that kids are expected to go to school. That's their job. But that job, for most of us in the queer community, is an unsafe place for us. So let's actually look at that lack of safety. I'm going to throw some numbers your direction. These are from a combination of the surveys from GLSEN, from Human Rights Campaign, from the Trevor Project, and the Williams Institute. All of those are really good resources to find information if you want to know more about the movement of the community. So, almost 60% of kids felt that they were unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation or, and this is important, their perceived sexual orientation. Simply by maybe being a little bit more flamboyant, wearing a bright clothes, suddenly they're picked out and that school space become unsafe for them. More than 40% of kids who are looking at their gender identity felt unsafe at school because of trying to express or discover that gender identity. 74% of kids who are part of the LGBTQIA+ community have been assaulted in some form in a school environment, whether it's verbal assault or physical assault. Almost 75% of kids report this. And a really disturbing number that goes with this is that most of them report that they do not share this information with school authorities because they do not expect that they will be supported and that anything will happen, and it will actually make them more of a target. So you, as a well-meaning caregiver, may want to be there for them, to create action, to make something happen, but that might actually be putting them in more danger. So this is a conversation that we all have to have in creating safer spaces. But something that's changed a little bit different, we have a wide age range in this room. Some of you are digital natives, some of you are adoptees. 40% of kids report online harassment. And what you need to understand is that this type of harassment takes on a 24-hour cycle. It's something that will happen at 2 in the morning when they woke up and they're checking online to see what's been happening. And where maybe some of you who are adopters had this idea where I might have been bullied at school during the day, but then I got to go home, I had dinner, I did homework. For me, I would read. Reading was my recovery zone. And then I'd go to sleep, and then I'd wake up ready to be armored up for the next day. But if you're in a 24-hour bullying cycle, there's no repair time. And that's going to eat away at the very essence of who you are. And you may ask, well, why do these kids go online if they know this is happening? What's the answer to that question? Everybody in this room knows. I need to know what's going on. I need to know if I show up tomorrow at school that I've been talked about last night, so I am prepared for that. So it's this vicious cycle that happens, and there's no repair in that trauma-based moment. This number, it's just the number 26. Maybe you see it all the time. Maybe some of you are 26 years old today. This is the average percentage of suicide attempts in the LGBT youth community. 26% of kids think their life has to end because there's no happiness ahead of them. National average for most adolescents is between 9 and 14%. If we look at trans kids, these numbers go up to 35%. If we look at trans kids of color, we're looking at almost a 50% suicide rate. I'm not talking ideation or thought. I'm actually talking about kids who are making attempts to take their lives. This is why I show up at EDGY every year when Cameron invites me on board, because we need to be there for these kids to help them know that their life is going to be worth living. But here's the really cool number. It's the number 1. That 1 is you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and each one of you who showed up here today. Whether you wanted to be here or your agency made you come. And I know the difference between the two. That number, you, can make a huge difference in the queer kid's life. I can tell you right now who the affirming adults were in my school experience. In 4th grade, it was Mrs. Hill, who recognized that I was a little bit brighter and a little bit more creative than the other kids, and she supported that and created space for that. It was 6th grade, Miss Conchalian, who realized that I wasn't causing trouble on purpose, but that I was bored, and she started challenging me to do extra work and learn more about the world I lived in. It is 11th grade, Mr. Melton, who created a safe space in the drama department where I could be whoever I wanted to be. And it was 12th grade, and I've actually talked to him before he passed away, Dr. Keith Kuhn, who was my AP English teacher, who taught me more about being myself than just my queer identity, but also to think for myself. And that was such a powerful gift he gave me. So we do know for a fact that school connectedness and having an affirming adult in a school situation is going to lower depression, it's going to lower stress and anxiety for these kids, it is going to raise attendance levels and raise school performance. And this goes back to even if it's just one affirming adult in that school environment can make this enormous difference for these kids. So think for a moment, just reflect. What's your school environment like? What's your agency environment like? What are the populations you're working with? What does that feel like right now? And then reflect on what you can bring back from today's conversations all throughout the day that will help improve that environment. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's not meant to be silly. It's going to sound a little bit silly. Ready? And I know nobody's gender identity and nobody's sexual orientation in this room. Well, a couple of you I do. When did you come out? Okay. As a queer man who does this kind of work, I do come out every day. You know what you almost got there, right? Okay. Oh, Cameron, I promise you I wouldn't cuss. I'll try my best. Yeah, some of us have to come out every day. But here's an interesting thing to think about. If you identify as cis, straight, hetero, this is a process you have not gone through. And no matter how warm and affirming and kind and supportive you are, it is so important to understand that you have not traveled my journey. You have not. You have not had to dig deep inside yourself and be willing to speak out loud in public forums to say that you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, allies, affirming, asexual. You have not had to go through that process. And so when you're working with these kids, I invite you to be humble as you step into our environments, Do not try and tell these kids who they should be and what they should be, but instead be curious and join them to help them discover who they want to be. So how often do you check yourself? What do I mean by this? There's an amazing Irish drag queen. Her name is Panty Bliss, okay? Look her up online. Years ago, when marriage equality was up in the Irish Parliament, she came and did this amazing public speech. Look it up online. It is stunning, and she's kind of stunning too, okay? And in it, she talked about the idea that every time she leaves her flat, she has to check herself. And what that means is I look in the mirror and I notice, am I wearing something that's going to clock me out in the world that says, oh, that's a gay person? When she walks out the front door, she looks both directions to see who's coming down the street to see if they are a safe person. When she gets on the tube, the subway, she has to check where she's going to sit for finding relative safety. Anyone in this room who is from a marginalized community or is a member of the LGBTQ community, or let's just face it and be honest, is a female-identified person, you know what this means, okay? You also know what it feels like to feel unsafe part of your day. As we've started identifying, most of these queer kids feel unsafe in their school environments, and they feel unsafe in their home environments. And how vigilant are you to your surroundings? Remember, this kind of level lifts our vigilance level. And a lot of queer kids live in a very hyper-vigilant, trauma-based state 24/7. So they are constantly checking the environment around them to make sure that they're in safe spaces. So, you know, as therapists and social workers and caring people, we often say, this is a safe space. That's bullshit. How in the world can we promise someone a safe space? It is actually impossible. What we do build is respect and trust in the room. We listen humbly, and we create connection. And maybe together with our client, with the person we're talking with, we weave a safe space. But I want you to be really careful about promising people that you're giving them a safe space, especially if you're working in agency and school situations where there are rules and regulations that you are going to be required to follow, or you could lose your license. If I promise you safety, but then I have to report something, guess what? That kid is never going to trust a social worker or a therapist again, ever. So these are things to think about when we use this word safety. Okay, so one of the biggest components for kids and their well-being is going to be the family experience. It is going to be how they interact and are supported by their families. Offering you an interesting thought. As a queer kid, my parents were both cisgender heterosexuals. My minority status is not reflected in my parent unit. This is a really unique thing to our community to reflect on and understand that I can't see how to become this version of myself because it's not reflected in my parents. So what happens in that parent unit is going to be very important to my development as an LGBTQ kid. So let's start with looking at negative family responses. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this in your work and heard this from kids and witnessed it in families. This negative response may be like just shutting the conversation down. It might be kicking the kid out of the house. It might be more subtle. It might be things like, well, we hear you, but don't tell anyone else in the family. Very, very, very present conversation, especially in the Hispanic community when kids come out. I love you, you're safe with me, but don't tell grandma. When we go to the family reunion, don't be too gay, don't bring your partner. You've heard people say that today on multiple occasions. Be gay, but don't be too gay, okay? I'm too gay, and I'm okay with that. So these are things to think about. Also, religious constraints. If you grow up in a very religious family, God does not accept gay people. These messages are going to shut these kids down. And they're going to create an environment inside their brains where they're constantly questioning this identity that's ready to burst forward, and the pressure of their family, who all they want from their family is to be loved for exactly who they are. On the other side of this coin, we have a positive family response. And what that's going to look like is a family that's affirming and curious and willing to learn and support. They invite their queer friends over to the house. They talk with other families. They create an environment where this kid can figure out who they want to be in the world. And that goes a long way to creating a positive and strong identity in these kids. One of the things I talk about in the book, and I think this is so important, parents always ask me, well, what do I do when my kid comes out? Here is your number one assignment as a parent when your kid comes out. Open your arms, hug them close, and say, I love you. Not I still love you, but I love you. That's all we need. Because in that moment where I come out to you, my heart is racing, my palms are sweating, I can't think straight. Ironic choice of words. Thank you for catching that. All I want to know in that moment is that you love me. You love me for all of me. That's all a parent has to do in that moment. So for those of you who are working with families, there are some things that you might want to help them focus on. This is fascinating how this is formatting, because that is not how I put it together. Now I'm wondering if I should make something out of it. What does PRY mean? Okay. So what we have to do is help parents. Either we help educate them or we encourage them to get educated from really well-vetted sources. Things like PFLAG, things like WPATH, things like the LGBTQ Center here in Los Angeles, to make sure that they're educating themselves and finding that education as a way to be present with their kids. Because the one thing I tell every parent is the last thing you're going to do is ask your kids to educate you. They have more than enough going on in their lives. Don't ask them to tell you about how they are supposed to be treated by their parent. Teach parents how to listen. You know, the number one thing I get in working with families is parents always say, my kid never listens to me. And what I say back to them is, how often do you listen to your kid? I am that therapist. But it's an important paradigm to really think about. A lot of parent energy is about this. It's about trying to form to mold. And especially when you have a queer kid coming into your family unit, letting themselves be seen, it's about taking information in, listening, being curious about what this identity they're sharing means to them, how it shows up in their world. And the same for clinicians, for us to be curious rather than to assume. A really interesting assumption that happens all the time when I tell someone I'm gay is the way they codify it, own up, just listen to your own brain, is, oh, he has sex with men. I do. Just one now. And there is so much more to me of being a gay man, a queer man, I use those interchangeably, than just who I sleep with. So that's why we have to listen to see, oh, you shared with me that you're pansexual. How does that show up in your world? What does that mean to you? Versus, ah, yes, I know, and I'm going to label my kid as that thing. I'm going to label my client as that thing that I learned, you know, on the pages of a document that I got at the EDGY Conference. There's so much more to it. Also, help parents understand that they need their own time for reflection, to encourage them to take time away from their kids, with their partners, with fellow parents of queer kids, with a therapist who's trained in this work, to reflect on their feelings. Because ultimately, when I come out to my parents, they are going to have big feelings. And I never want them to deny that they are having big feelings. And when I do the work, I encourage kids to understand your parents are going through something just as you are. And I encourage parents to say, you're going through something. I know you want to be the cool, affirming parent, but you also may be having these other feelings, thoughts, and ideas. Let's witness them together so they don't take hold inside there. Encourage parents to get support. This is not a project you want to do on yourself. So find vetted, good, powerful support where parents can then find their way through this journey themselves so they can be even more affirming for the kids that are in their life. So another piece of this puzzle that does add up is multiple minority stress. And I'm trying to really help you understand the journey that these kids that are sitting in these schools are going through right now. So as a queer kid, I showed you the numbers earlier of what they're going through, and it is a lot. But when you stack another minority layer on top of that, it doubles, triples, quadruples the influence on their sense of well-being. So if you have a kid who's from a community of color, if you have someone who is neurodiverse, if you have a kid who is differently abled, socioeconomic status, education status, all form into this. And so when we stack these minority identities one on top of the other, there is less likelihood that these kids will show up at schools, and very unlikely they will show up in your agencies for any type of support. These are the kids who will disappear into the system. So we need to be hyper aware of how those layers of multiple minority identities are going to stack up and influence this story on a deep level. So as I said earlier, you're a kid, what's your job? To go to school. And you are living under all this stress. How well do you think I'm going to do at school? How am I going to do with my friendships? Why do I even want to show up at school? And if we can identify that the coming out process itself is a trauma-based experience, it will go a long way to help us supporting my community on a really deep level. As I look around the room, I see some of you are kind of being fully loaded by this conversation. I want you all to take a deep breath in. Exhale, let it go. Remember, the reason we're all here is to find a way to support these kids. Yeah, this is some hard shit to listen to, but it's real. And now we're going to figure out what can we do with it. So let's look at this. The first thing is about creating a safe space. Remember I told you that word safe is bullshit, and I'm just going to cuss now because that's who I am. I'm sorry, I've tried. This is just part of the storyline, okay? Where's Luca? Give me some love, okay? Give me some little love, okay? So first, as we've been talking today, you need to be really aware of this journey that LGBTQ students are going through. Once again, if you are cis or het, it is a different experience that you went through. So hopefully today we'll start this little awareness inside of you that will grow. Hopefully you can bring these conversations back to your agencies, to your schools, to your own work, so that you can be part of a system that start creating more support. Be willing to make referrals. So I want to address this, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but everybody close your eyes for a moment. You're not going to be asked to raise hands. I just want you to contemplate this moment. How many of you in this room, because of your own personal belief systems or your religious belief systems, might not be able to support an LGBTQ kid in your school or agency? Just sit with it. Okay, let your eyes open. I hold no judgment for that. In fact, I often ask this question. I once had a person in the audience identify that they would not be able to because their church does not believe in LGBTQ people, an identity, anything. I actually, and the whole room turned on this person. I mean, turned on them hard. And I had to stop the room, and I said, no. It is more important that this person identifies that they could not support these kids than to try and fake it. Because any of you who work with kids know that if you try and fake it, they're going to call you out in a second, and you may never win their trust again. So know your own temperature as to how much you can support my community. And if you are not the person, know who you can refer them to. Whether it's someone within your agency, whether it's another school, another teacher on the school grounds, whether it's an organization, know how to refer out for your particular community. Be willing to connect with these students. I'm have a mixed energy as a therapist. A lot of people say, like, well, queer people need to be working with queer therapists. Unfortunately, there aren't enough of us out there to work with everybody who might be seeking us. But if you can authentically affirm the identity of these kids you're working with and be there to love and care for them and be there to help them find their way on this journey, that connection is going to go farther than having a shared identity. In fact, sometimes, and this is a warning for all of you queer therapists and social workers in the room, my experience of coming out is not the same as every one of my clients experiencing coming out. And I need to be really hyper careful of not projecting my storyline onto them. Just a warning for y'all, because I guarantee every one of you has done it at least once. You probably caught yourself, but you've done it at least once. And I'm not going to name names. Okay. Also, be knowledgeable about LGBTQ issues. It is so cool that all of you are here today. But this is just the beginning, the tip of a very enormous, constantly changing and growing iceberg. There is so much to understand and learn about our community. If you are going to work with me, then I think it is on you to learn and keep growing as my community keeps learning and growing. You know, one of the most fascinating journeys we're on right now is there are multiple studies that are coming out that are looking at a parallel process between being neurodiverse and being trans and non-binary. We do not know what the actual correlation is, but we're seeing a high causality, or no, we're seeing a high connection right there on those numbers. And it's really fascinating thing to study right now. So that's why we get to keep learning and growing as a community and as providers. Knowledge of relevant services. Yes, you're going to connect kids to the LGBT center. Great. But what about knowing if there's an electrolysis person who helps trans kids who want to do some hair removal? Really cool thing, I'll offer this resource. MAC Cosmetics does this thing where if you're a trans kid who wants to learn about makeup, you can go in and they will do it either in the public space or a private space if that makes you feel better. So you can see what a beautiful beauty makeup would look like on you. Remember that. Totally cool. Mac's been doing this for years. I love him for this. Have respect for students. When you work for students for a long time, you hear all the ups and downs of who they are. Sometimes you sit in the room and you're like, oh, here's another one with that story. You know it's not true, they know it's not true, and you kind of get like caught up in that I've been doing this for too long energy. Anybody relate to that? I've done it. I will own it completely, okay? What we need to do is really remind ourselves why we're there on a regular basis and to respect the students and respect the uniqueness of their story. So, basics, staff's training. Start using gender-free and neutral language in all environments in your staff areas. It's not as hard as you think. And I want to give you a really important thing to understand, is that if in front of kids, you use their pronouns, you're very respectful of their name, and then you go into a staff meeting and you misgender them or misname them, that is just as disrespectful as if you do it to their face. It means you're not actually affirming their full identity. Use open-ended questions. You've heard that from multiple presenters today. I've heard it out in the audience all the time, is asking these how questions. Oh, you're bisexual. Tell me what that means to you. How does that show up in your world? How is it affecting your day-to-day experience? So you ask these deeper, curious, open-ended questions, and that's what creates the bond and the connection. Thank you, sir. I love it. I've got like this sumo band that just gave me like 10 minutes. Get regular updates on LGBTQ health and psychosocial issues. Remember, this is a constantly changing story. What you learn today may be different next week, will be different next year. So keep being willing to learn and open yourself up to it. At the beginning, you notice I introduced myself and my pronouns. Why do I do that? Because if I step into a space and I say, hey, I'm John, my pronouns are he, him, I'm a cis queer therapist, that sets up a paradigm where you're like, oh, I could talk to this person about these questions later on if I want to. I am not forcing it on you, and I am not forcing you to do this. Really important thing, there are lots of organizations trying to be real hip and cool, and they'd have their board meetings, and everyone would like introduce themselves and say, and your pronouns. There were people who weren't ready to talk openly about their pronouns, and it made it really uncomfortable. So if you are comfortable speaking your pronouns out loud when you introduce yourselves, it sets up a paradigm that lets the people around you know that you would be open to these conversations. So just a real simple way to approach this. Yeah, this pronoun puzzle. Okay, first of all, avoid gender markers. How may I help you today? It's really easy to do. Politely ask if unsure, like would your records be under another name? I'm not looking under the right name. Put it on yourself. Ask respectfully about names. And use gender-neutral language. So you could use they instead of he and she until you're sure. So let's address the they in the room. Everybody ready? Oxford English Dictionary says that they, them, is a singular pronoun and can be used that way. I will guarantee that every one of you has used it in your lifetime and you're not even conscious of it. Ready to learn how? Here we go. We walk into a room and there's a water bottle on this table right here. Somebody left it behind. Oh, I wonder if they know they lost their water bottle. Do you think they're going to come back and get it later? Should we hold on to it for them? Wait a minute, it's that simple. Okay? Can you relate and understand how simple that actually is? It is usually our brains that get in the way of doing this very simple thing, and once you can start doing it, it becomes more natural. Let me ask you a curious question. Have you noticed that in my conversation today, I have mostly used gender-neutral conversation? Did it seem weird? Did it seem uncomfortable? Did you even clock it till this moment when I pointed it out to you? Except for specific cases where I was gendering someone for a reason, everything else has been gender neutral. That's how natural it can be if you decide you're going to be willing to focus on it. So earlier, there was a conversation I heard that was really fascinating. And one of the presenters was talking about don't assume that kids are LGBTQ. And I thought that was interesting because I knew I had this coming up. What I would suggest is don't assume that everyone you meet is cisgender heteronormative. Because that assumption closes the gate on a lot of really interesting connections and conversations. So be willing to open up, drop that assumption, and then meet people for exactly who they are. Use affirming language, especially when you're in meetings, when you're in public spaces. Respect the pronouns that someone has offered and told you that these are their pronouns. Because guess what? You used to hear the phrase preferred pronouns. Well, preferred made them seem like really flippant. They're not preferred pronouns. They are the person's pronouns. So dump preferred out of your language if you're still using it, okay? Also understand that part of this work is not just doing it in silence, but being willing to stand up in front of spaces, whether it's at your school meetings, whether it's in a larger community setting, to advocate for LGBTQ rights and policies in your schools and agencies. These are really important things for my community to know that you are making an effort to help support us on this journey. So, parents are going to have concerns. As we mentioned earlier, be willing to educate, be willing to listen and help those parents resource in their journey so we can create an affirming environment wrapped around these kids everywhere they go. Encourage families when they're ready and the kids are ready to be open enough to connect with other affirming families so we create this beautiful network within communities of connection that then creates support. I want to give you this challenge to step up to the plate and challenge LGBTQ comments and conversations. Now, I'll be honest, I do this work all the time. It's where I am, it's who I am. If I have slept well and had a great day and am feeling energized and present and right there, and I hear someone make an anti-queer comment, I will step in and say, hey, I don't know if you realize that, but that might have been offensive to somebody in this space right now. If I am tired and I have not eaten and I've not had a chance to do some yoga and some meditation, I am a big old grumposaurus, I probably will not step up in that moment because my energy is not ready for it. I say if you can step up 75% of the time, it'll make a huge difference in everybody's affirming environment for our community. Okay, so you might be feeling a little bit awkward right now with these conversations, and guess what? That's totally okay. It is totally normal in this. Gender, sexual orientation, it's a really complex thing. That's why we have these huge conferences and do all this work, because it's not just a one and done moment. It is an ongoing piece of the puzzle for all of you who want to support my community. And be aware this is an evolving story. I do this work all the time, and I hear this all the time, but the names and the words change every day. Cool, okay? Rather than trying to shut it down, join with the kids you're working with and learn from them, so then you can be part of it. But here's the big thing. We don't want to fuck it up. We just don't, okay? But you're gonna. I do it. And this is a language I talk in fluently. It's part of who I am at my core. It's okay. Breathe. Apologize. But don't make it like, oh my God, I know exactly who you are. You told me everything. I know your name. I know your truth. I'm so sorry I did this to you. I will never do it again. I promise. Hey, everybody, I'm so sorry I did this to them. Because you've then made it all about yourself. Instead, it's simple, I'm sorry, can you remind me of your name? And that's all it has to be. A real simple understanding. Ask for the help you need. Catch yourself and own it. And then when unclear, just simply ask. So we've had a journey from 9 a.m. this morning to just about 4 o'clock this afternoon. And I thank you all for being present for this really deep and beautiful conversation. But I would like to close today with us really focusing on that one kid that you want to be present for. So close your eyes. And I'm going to share first some of the words that I've heard during today's conversations. I want you to drink these in. From EDGY 2026, together we can create spaces where everyone can belong. Everyone has a right to share information about their identity with those in their life on their own terms. Bringing youth together is a key way to help them build resilience. Everyday interactions erode or build trust. Kids don't need us to be perfect. They just need us to show up. I want you to think about the words you heard today that inspired, touched, or affected you. I want you to draw them into your heart, into your soul, into your spirit. I want you to then picture that one kid that you're working with right now, that's in your world. Maybe it's part of your family even. And you bring that warmth, that love, that spirit that we all created today, and give it to them right now with a big, beautiful burst of light from your heart to theirs. Everyone take a deep breath in. So I want to thank you for sharing your time with me today. Oh, look, it's me again. So I told you my high school friends, and we're all still connected. We have one of them, and he has all the pictures. And every once in a while, to embarrass us, he sends them out. So this is me. Yay. See, sparkly already. So I want to thank all of you, once again, for your time all day long, because your commitment to being here is going to make a huge difference in these kids' lives. It makes a difference in my life, meeting all of you, connecting with you, learning from you today. And so I send you out into the world. Bring that love out. Let it spread. Let it connect. And find that space in yourself where you can be here for that version of me who needed you when I was a little kid. Thank you all so much. Be well, be safe. Thank you. That was amazing.
give it up for John one more time.